Noah hated being the new kid. He hated the stairs. He hated the whispers. Most of all, he hated his new school. Northwood High was a gloomy building full of echoing hallways and flickering lights. It smelled like old books and floor polish. It was like stepping into a black and white movie, but with worse food. Noah's one attempt at making friends had ended in disaster. He'd tried to compliment a girl on her Ramones t-shirt. She'd stared at him like he was speaking Klingon. Then she'd moved tables. He decided to stick to his peanut butter sandwiches and invisibility cloak. That is, until he heard about room 313. It started with whispers. Kids huddled in corners, their voices hushed. There were rumors of strange noises, cold spots, and a feeling of being watched. The stories were always vague, always secondhand. But they all pointed to one place, room 313, sealed shut and forbidden. Noah, usually happy to blend into the background, felt a flicker of curiosity. He found Ivy in the library, surrounded by stacks of dusty books. She was small and wiry, with bright green eyes and a nose perpetually stuck in a book. Her dark hair was always escaping its braid, as if fighting to keep up with her racing thoughts. She reminded him of a mischievous raven. Ivy, it turned out, was the school's resident expert on all things weird. She knew every ghost story, every urban legend, every creepy rumor that ever haunted Northwood's halls. And room 313, oh, she had theories.
Some say it's haunted by the ghost of a heartbroken prom queen. Others say it's a portal to another dimension.
She paused, her eyes gleaming.
But my personal theory, it's where they keep the confiscated things.
Noah echoed, confused.
You know, stuff so dangerous, so creepy, they had to confiscate it twice.
The rumors about room 313 were like whispers themselves. They snaked through the hallways, growing more distorted with each retelling. Some said the room was once a laboratory, sealed after a dangerous experiment. Others claimed it was the principal's office, abandoned after he'd gone mad. One particularly chilling tale spoke of a group of students who dared to peek inside. They'd claimed to see strange symbols scrawled on the walls and hear a voice whispering their names. The next day, they'd all come down with a mysterious illness, their skin pale and clammy, their eyes wide with terror. They never spoke of what they'd seen again. Noah, despite his initial curiosity, started to feel a shiver of apprehension. These stories, however exaggerated, had a way of seeping into your mind, taking root like a bad seed. But Ivy, far from being deterred, seemed more intrigued than ever. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She was determined to uncover the truth behind room 313, and Noah, much to his surprise, found himself swept up in her enthusiasm. The door to room 313 was at the end of the school's oldest wing, tucked away behind a dusty old tapestry. It was heavy and made of dark wood, with a tarnished brass knob that felt ice cold to the touch. A rusty padlock hung from the handle, a silent sentinel guarding whatever secrets lay beyond.
How do we get in?
Noah whispered, his heart pounding in his chest. Ivy, ever prepared, pulled a hairpin from her braid.
Leave that to me,
she said with a mischievous grin. With surprising dexterity, she picked the lock. The door creaked open, releasing a musty odor that smelled of decay and forgotten things. Noah felt a chill run down his spine. He peered cautiously inside. The room was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by a sliver of pale moonlight filtering in through a crack in the boarded-up windows. Dust motes danced in the air, catching the faint light. The air was thick with silence, a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to muffle all sound. The first thing Noah noticed was the mirror. It stood in the center of the room, draped in a dusty white sheet, like a ghostly figure awaiting its cue. It was a grand old thing with an ornate frame that glinted faintly in the dim light.
Don't you ever watch horror movies? Noah hissed, his voice barely a whisper. Never unveil the creepy mirror.
Ivy just shrugged, her eyes fixed on the shrouded object.
Relax, it's just a mirror, she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence.
She slowly reached out and pulled the sheet away. The mirror's surface was cloudy with age, but as they watched it seemed to clear, as if something were breathing on it from the other side. Their reflections stared back at them, distorted and grotesque. Noah's reflection had an evil glint in its eye, while Ivy's seemed to be grinning wickedly, a cruel caricature of her mischievous smile.
That's not right, Noah stammered, feeling a cold dread creep up his spine.
Ivy, to her credit, only looked mildly disconcerted.
Huh, she said, tilting her head. That's weird.
Then they heard it, a low whisper, slithering out from the shadows, echoing through the silent room. It was a raspy, sibilant sound, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
Who's there? Noah whispered, his voice trembling. He strained his ears, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound.
The whisper grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to be toying with them, circling them like a predator stalking its prey. They could almost make out words now, distorted and menacing.
Foolish children, the whisper hissed. Curiosity killed the cat.
Noah felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no game. This was real fear, primal and instinctive. He wanted to run, to escape from this room and whatever lurked within it, but his feet felt rooted to the spot.
Ivy, however, seemed to have found her voice. "Show yourself," she shouted, her voice surprisingly strong. "We're not afraid of you."
The whisper chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that sent shivers down their spines.
Fear is delicious, it rasped. And you taste divine?
The reflections in the mirror grew even more grotesque, their features twisting into monstrous visages. Noah could feel his own fear, sharp and metallic, rising in his throat. He had to get out of there. Ivy, her eyes blazing with a strange light, grabbed a heavy bookend from a nearby shelf. Before Noah could stop her, she hurled it at the mirror with a primal scream. The glass shattered with an ear-splitting crack, sending shards flying across the room. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow more unsettling than the sound that had preceded it. Noah stared at the shattered mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. The reflections, instead of disappearing, seemed to fragment, multiplying across the jagged shards. He could see dozens of their faces, distorted and malevolent, staring back at him with cold, dead eyes.
"What have you done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible.
Ivy stood frozen, the bookend still clutched in her hand. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a strange, almost triumphant gleam.
"I broke the connection," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "It feeds on fear. I took away its power."
They backed slowly out of the room, their eyes never leaving the shattered mirror. As they reached the door, Noah glanced back one last time. The reflections were still there, fragmented but ever present, watching them with their cold, unblinking stares. And as he watched, one by one, they began to smile. Noah slammed the door shut, fumbling with the lock until it clicked into place. He didn't speak until they were safely outside, the warm spring air a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of room 313.
"What was that?" he finally asked, his voice shaking. Ivy shook her head, her face pale but composed. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't think we've seen the last of it."
Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night in room 313 began to fade. The school seemed less imposing, the whispers less menacing. Noah even managed to strike up a conversation with the girl from the Ramones t-shirt. Life, it seemed, was returning to normal. Then one afternoon, as Noah was stuffing books into his locker, he saw it. A flash of movement in the small cracked mirror on the inside of the locker door. He slammed the locker shut, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he imagined it? He cautiously opened the locker again, peering into the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, pale and apprehensive. But behind it, in the depths of the cracked glass, he thought he saw another reflection. A flicker of movement, a distorted grin. And then, just for a moment, he could have sworn he saw two figures standing in the reflection, their features twisted into grotesque smiles. One with wild green eyes and the other with familiar, curious brown eyes. The bell rang, jarring him from his thoughts. He slammed his locker shut and hurried down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. He never looked in that locker mirror again, but sometimes, late at night, he would remember the whispers, the cold dread, and the lingering smiles in the shattered reflections, and he would wonder with a shiver of unease just how much of what they had experienced in room 313 was real and how much was a figment of their own fear.